And okay, so, or we're down. So we have our setup for the perfect restorative beginning. So you sit in front of your short end of your bolster and have your legs for a moment in a crossed angle. So it's not a foot together pattern. And simply feel how the seat is kind of this bucket seat position. Like if you're in a bucket seat, that kind of pattern in the legs. It's a little bit vibrant in the leg muscles and the hips to hold this position. But what I want you to do is take your belt, have it in a loop, and then get your loop overhead around your hips. And then you'll uncross the feet so that the soles are together and scoop them up with your belt and let the legs land into the belt. So you get a feeling that you're trying to land into this belt and the whole shaping of your body on the props. So when we slide the belt to the kind of the eyebrows of the buttocks, you're going to push the belt down. You'll also use your blocks. And if I have my blocks here under my legs, I've been using the block support. So instead of it being flat or even kind of under my thigh, I've been putting the block at the second height. Maybe you do this already. It's second setting. And it's and then I just slide it underneath kind of this little pocket under my thigh and my calf. And then I can actually kind of lift my calf and roll it open, kind of like that. It's not as diggy into my legs. It doesn't like push as much into my skin. And then as I lower back, if you have two sandbags, you can use one on each thigh. If you have one, I would use it today for your breathing muscles. So I'm going to push the blanket down because it feels cozy for my neck. And you might have the blanket a little bit higher up, so it's just at the brain basin. And some of you might push it so it supports that connectivity of your brain into your shoulders. Okay, so personal choice. Now we're going to add that sand, and it's either on your legs if you have two, one on each inner leg, upper inner leg. And if you have one sand, I would put it so it's lengthwise today. And you might have to do a little bit of a sand dance to coordinate its bulkiness on top of your center line. So consider that this is the center line, like you have a spine line and you have a frontal spine. So when I move my arms down, I'm going to encourage you to start with the arms relaxed and bring in that kind of levity with your breath. So we relax the eyes. We feel where there's coordination with our inhale, receiving, and exhale, letting go. So using the weight to embody the breath. The weight of the sandbag helps you kind of embody the reality of the breath moving through you. Otherwise, it's somewhat of a felt sense, but the sand makes it a little more kind of real for me because I can feel that it moves with the breath. Because the breath likely doesn't move because of the sand, right? It moves with your motivation. So without being too silent about your breathing, you might feel that you can notice the movement, but also as you exhale, letting go and becoming grounded and present. And sense the environment of the shoulders and their connection of moving and settling onto your props. So I know you likely feel like you got on the props, it's all said and done, but it takes some time to really let the bones and the connective tissue start maturing in this supported chest opener. Okay, so I give you these two options. The arms could stay down just as they are. Some of you have them close probably, some have them a little farther open. And then that other option would be to lift the arms, and as you move them back, the aim is eventually to hold your elbows with your hands, but I want you to get a feeling if you go slow, if you close and bring the hands to reach around to the elbows, maybe you hold the forearms and then you kind of get a tip of an elbow. And once that is a held sense, be honest if it feels appropriate. If you feel like you're pushing into your head with your arms, then your work is on moving the arms back. Yeah, and that I think takes a little quality of suppleness in your rib cage. Okay, so it doesn't have to do with the sandbag if you're using that. It has to do with the armpit, chest, and the ribs opening. Relaxing the face. Maybe you have to nod your head a tiny bit. Soften through the jaw. Okay, so we alert the energy through the arms, the strength, and also through the shoulder musculature. Now change the crossing of the arms so you get a feel of that hold. And I sense my shoulders have a peaked, like a bit of an intense tightening around the joint, like a little bit of restriction to start to bear into that grounding and blood flow into the joint. So noticing what is positive about that. If it makes the arm go numb, it's not a good one for you. So you'll find your choices here. And then that other choice, right, is the arms down. So let's return back to that as the arms flow and the elbows touch, maybe a little wider out to the sides, but they're certainly on the ground. And let a few final breaths be in this shape. Notice what's positive in the hips, in the shoulders, back, the chest easily opens and the spine strengthens. So a few moments. Try to maintain some of these opening layers of attention with your spine. And I think most of us will find that our spine is adapted to this shape. You know, if you're open enough in your ribs and your breathing, it likely isn't a difficult thing to hold. It becomes restorative and recuperative after a while. So take off any sand, and we're going to unbuckle, and I want you to bring the knees, they just simply move to point up, and your blocks will be maybe part of this next crossover. Some of you have a ball. If you have a ball, get that. And then place that to the upper outer left thigh. Now, not so high up, right? So you want to have it so it's like not right on your waist or the hip bone. It's a little bit below. So if your knees kind of swish side to side, you can feel the ball attach to the upper outer left leg. Okay. Now, if you don't have a ball, you could use, I would use probably a sandbag because it's just a little bit smushier than a block. And the block is certainly a structure that you can, it absorbs the movement. So as you lift up the right foot, cross that ankle to the left knee, and maybe it's a little bit of the lower bones of the right leg on that left leg. You're going to tilt your body over so it pushes down into that ball. And you might do a little palpation here. You might with the ball. So you might move the ball because it can't like stay on the ground in the middle of your left thigh, right? You can't somehow get a lift for it. So you have to lift it there. and then lean the legs over. And that's too much for me. I don't have enough circulation in my hip to do that. So some of you might find you can go far over, but you want your spine to stay connected, as much of it as possible, to the bolster. That includes the lower. So if you tilt your legs over to that left, hold the right knee with your left hand, and your guide of movement is towards the left with your left hand holding. You're moving, well, I guess you're not actively creating a specific inches of movement, but it's the intention is towards the left with your knee. So come into this crossover shape. It's pretty much a pigeon pose. And if you kind of layer the intention around the hip, I know it's not presenting that for you as far as what your memory of pigeon might be, but it is all the pieces of the pigeon puzzle. And as the rib cage centers and the breathing becomes easier, you might let your head turn a little to the right. It just depends on the blanket support for you. But let the heart space relax. Yeah, sliding happens with the bottom foot. Feel what shift occurs. Breathing in. Exhaling smooth. Even if some of these things are not extreme, it's a collection of shapes, right? They have a cumulative effect. Now, scan the sensation here through this right side, right from the, well, I don't necessarily scan when I'm sensing, feeling, like brain to jaw necessarily. It's more of this sensory awareness in from my leg really and down into the hip, because that's the boldest feeling. But feel where the right shoulder moves back and towards the bolster to present balance. And then as you let go of that knee, you'll feel the legs shift back to center, and then uncross, take the opposite side without too much conversation in your mind where to go. And then as that ball is moved over to the right thigh, yeah, I had that idea that the ball could go higher, but that seems a little bit displaced from my hip. So if you have that suppleness and you want to make a deeper stretch, your ball on the right side that I'm showing on the left would simply be a little bit higher on the outside of your leg. Yeah, but if you do kind of get a little bit tilted and you're off the bolster, then it's not appropriate. Hold on to the left knee. And the right hand is the holder. But today I'm not pushing my left arm necessarily back on this one or pushing the opposite arm. But if you like that, if you're moving it back and reaching, it's up to you if you want the arm down. They're both beneficial for the shoulder. And if one hurts, then it's not beneficial for restorative. And if that left knee is kind of pivoting open, kind of feel what a pigeon leg pattern would be. So it's a hooked leg. It's hooked on either a knee or the floor, right? That's how we do that pattern in the hip. So as that leg is kind of working its way with the hand holding the knee, if one side you tend to find that you can pull the knee towards you more than stretch it across, then I would kind of back off and maybe come back to step one. And then feel if maybe your leg, you're pushing your leg too far down to start. Maybe you need your right foot closer in, and then set yourself over so that you have an easy time honoring that opportunity. It might feel okay, but if there's any issues with the knee that's presented, then you might have to change the right foot to be farther down. Any issues on the right knee, then you let the right foot slide a bit down. That's important here. So crossing that leg over, feeling the same thing with the ball. It's a nice responsive surface to this position. And just recognizing here that simplicity, breathing. Now as we release the grip, this time we'll windshield wiper our way. So as you take the ball aside, I've thought about trying to do windshield wiper like with the ball, so it's a smaller base windshield wiper. I'm in a fixed frame with my joints, but it's simply a shape of, it's not a shape, it's a movement pattern of wriggling circulation, right, in the legs. So you want to continue this with movement, and the movement doesn't have to go suddenly fast or, well, I guess like windshield wipers, huh? You could have 3 different speeds here. So find the speed that works for you and feel the footing. I know the windshield wipers don't have feet, but you get to use them again soon. All right, and someday, you might find that the movement pattern, you need to find an end range with it. And your body is like, it's a little different than a fixed object. You have a living experience with it, possibly creating a little more movement. But before we get to side stage, I want you to notice when the knees go side to side, there's some sense of kind of pulling, and it's pretty moderate, I find, in my side. So roll to the left and come on up to your hip here. And then we'll take a bolster, the one you have, okay, and turn it across so it's just fixed right next to your left leg perfectly. And you'll unravel the blankets if they're kind of rolled up anyway, so they're nicely stacked. You might take the top blanket and make it a little bit higher. See, I just take 2 from that quarter fold and then make it into kind of a bunched up blanket. That works good for my neck. Not everyone's going to need that. And here's an idea I don't think about. So I could turn it. It's probably a little bit more neck conscious. Okay, get a ball if you have one, or a block on the inside of that right leg, and then stretch the right leg back. So it's the opposite of windshield wiper with the leg now, right? This is like the windshield wiper going the other direction, right? It's the opposite of us focusing on moving them out. It's moving one in and one open. So I'll add a block overhead. That's what I like to do with my arm. But your arm on the right side might span open for a while. You might kind of play with this feature of the shoulder, the front shoulder. I mean, some of us might point to our shoulders and kind of point to the side, and maybe kind of reach our hand to the back. But we have attachments here, right? So feel where the body gets kind of heavy into the props, right? The bolster primarily, and the ribs kind of shift around. And then if you want to add the sand to your side, you could do that. I suppose you have to have your sandbag right along for the ride. And then encourage that to be a grounding influence for the waist. But also, if the knee below notices any amount of like pressure building when you put the sand on, you're going to want to notice how the flow in the body works here. So I find that sometimes that, and maybe it's just becoming sensitive and more sensitive to sensation, because that's what you do with sensations. You might move the knee a little bit closer in. So get a feel for a balance between using the position of the right leg and the sand, and really find what works for your coordination. The right leg doesn't have to be poised and bending. It could be stretching down as well. whatever you're doing with that right knee, try to be sure that it's not hurting, right? So keep it in a space of support. With the right hand overhead for some of us on a block, and the head on a supported blanket. Good. And let the left arm feel that it's between the bolster and the blankets. But it's not trying to push into either of them. It's just kind of in that spacer. And then giving yourself some time to center into that left hip. And then the primary focus is in the intercostals, the muscles between the ribs. It's fine if you feel the breath gradually and not try to overdo. The pose will take care of itself by just letting it exist on its own. Even if you change the arm position or the neck, and you turn your head so you're a little bit more on the back of your head. And feel what's right for your neck. If that's too much pull down the side of the upper spine, then you let your head go back to that resting. And there are a few more slow breaths. It doesn't need to be super deep breath. I don't want you to struggle, but feel a sense of slowing and centering. And we have that left inner leg, hopefully kind of resting. I know that sometimes even in this position, we might still be kind of guarding in the lower leg. But if you let go of that reach with the right hand overhead, you're going to slowly come into an all fours position. We'll just cut to the chase to it. And when I take off my sand and I turn towards the floor, it's like I know my navel turns towards the floor for those shapes when I get into hands and knees. So, work, I think this is like a life's work though. It's how to kind of get back into that stage before you are on your 2 feet, right? Trying to figure out what maybe you missed out on. So when you turn and you get to table pose, I'm a little more content with table with a blanket under my knees. So I'm just going to use it, even if it's brief, just get a hold of my blanket. And then when I plot my hands approximately shoulder width, I move my spine up. So I'm scooping, and that sense of scoop goes all the way through the traps, the upper back, through the brain, and then let your head, so the natural weight of your head is relaxing, and you might nod your head a little side to side, right? You might feel the hands and the wrists and the energy that pools there. So take a reach back with your hips, just enough that you can lift up your hands for a moment. I know the hands can get some pressure, some impressions, right, with the pressure on the wrist. So open up the fingers and then bend your elbows quite a bit so that when you lift up your knees, your elbows are bending, your knees are bending. Only way to get them upwards is just to crease them. And then get a feel of lifting and lowering through the heels. Now, my heels, I'm not going to try to get the heels to push down the floor. I'm just working on movement. My elbows have now tried to straighten out, so I'm going to bend them again. Try to keep them at least a micro bend, so you're not trying to lock your arms. So lift and lower through your heels, or through the leg, not through just the heel. All connected, and then shift down to the knees and stretch the right leg back and up. Hopefully you got some room. And then as the left arm reaches forwards, I'm lucky I got a block here, I can just hold that. But lift the left arm up. It can always go higher, I'm sure of that. So I just do the best I can with the moment of balance or challenge. And then lower the left hand and the right knee and shift sides, left leg back, right arm up. Try to calculate some hip neutrality here. So if you're getting a little bit shifted in the hip, come back into the center. Left heel just pushes back. Not even spending energy on how it looks or is my arm position perfect with my the directions, just alternating the arm and leg. So as you lower down that right hand, we'll take a rounded shape with our back, scooping, flexing the spine, chin to chest, breathe. Inhale, arch the spine, just hands and knees. Exhale, round the back. Feel the scooping really from your back of your legs, your glutes, through the back muscles, through the mid-spine, and then your head, your neck, chin tucks. Toes under, lift up the knees, stretch back to downward dog. Okay, so manifest that pattern of pushing the floor away and then feeling your sitting bones or the connection of your sitting bones moving back a bit. Breathe. Soften the knees, walk your feet a little forward to your blanket, and then walk your hands back towards your legs and take a standing child's pose. So the arms will really kind of soften, and they can either kind of scoop around so your palms face back. Maybe you're in the air with the hands, maybe you clutch the legs, but let the weight of your brain surrender down to elongate the spine. Yeah, see if you can find the importance of head's weight, not in your head. Maybe it's helpful for you to let your arms sway a little forward and dangle, or to hold your elbows. Personal choice. Nice. So feeling where the transitional quality of being on 2 feet, you know, the general motion right here might be you feel fairly cognizant of your balance on the feet, but it sure is different when your upper body is completely moving into the legs versus standing with your upper body in the air. So use this compilation of movement. It hasn't changed. We're still in the forward bend, to enrich that blood flow through the hamstrings. It's an inversion. The head is below the heart. And for some, we might be a little bit higher up than farther down with the brain, but you're still in an equal inversion, right? Even if you're kind of up a little bit or you're a little bit lower, we're all equal with this position. Okay, bringing the knees to a bending, and so the back really has more flexion. Really good one for digestive tract, right? Because the knees are purposely, your thighs are really along those 2 sides of the tract, and breathing into that. You know, most of us having touch there is a little bit uncomfortable, but when it's yourself, it feels pretty good to have the legs supporting that circulation. Something comforting about it. So when you come back forward, and I like some of these standing shapes versus kneeling child pose, it's just no pressure on my knees. So as I scoot my feet back and I come back to a table version, then we're going to turn to side sage with the right hip down. And maybe you got a blanket under there. That's kind of cozy. I guess you could keep the blanket and then just go find another one. Maybe we should have 3 blankets. or you could just get a towel or something else. That might be something we add to our little list. So 2 blankets and a towel or something for that shape if we do that again. Taking your setup appropriately with your ball. And if you use the sand on your side in the previous sage, and you noticed any kind of knee stuff, this would be a good one to work on the ball. So you feel like very supported. If it feels somewhat, then you want to make it the most comfortable reach back with the left hip joint. The quadricep kind of flares. And then when I lean in, here I'm going to get my ribs kind of wrangled. If you got the round bolster, you're preferred to use that for these side sages. Okay, so kind of get a feel of being in the side zone. We're getting there. Yep. And then as you lower your head to your blanket and you kind of spring into the arm movement back, it's sort of spring loaded for that direction in your ribs, but not always does our shoulder work that way. So it maybe works that way, but it also hurts that way. So you'll feel what is accessible for you. You want this practice to be accessible internally. And then we either add the sand to the side, or we let the sand be at the hip or the ribs, or no sand. Yeah, if it was a knee issue the last side, you might notice if your sand was on your hip, that can cause a little more pressure. So the side might be completely pressure free down at the knee. And then when you're reaching, motion is complete as you know it. Be honest if you need to loosen that up or change what it means for you to be feeling an accessible pose. So that might mean a little bends a bit, opens. Feel the body weight into that right hip. Breathing. Now find a connection here in the side space, left side space, of a little bit of arching. So feel that your spine wise has an arch when it's spine wise. And how do we find things like twists, which are supportive for massaging the organs, toning the spine, strengthening the spine, and so forth? We're going to be approaching that in the next shape. So I want you to notice on this one how you can kind of refine this reach, within reach, that's realistic for you. So I'm admittedly a little bit turned towards the screen to see how things are going, but and that we're there. But if you're a little more on your side, which is where I would prefer you to focus, but if you do stretch open, that's okay too with the arm out. But get a feel for the side rib cage, right? I know many of us, maybe when we're breathing, we're feeling the front rib cage, but feeling it because there's sand, there's that more, the direct intent. And this is what we're going to be trying to get mobile, is this rib cage next. So instead of your twist thinking it so much on spine, I want you to feel a little more on the ribs. Maybe you already did. Okay, let's come out of this. So the sand is going to shift over to just off of the mat, or right on it. That's fine too. But swing the left knee towards the right so it shifts on stacks. Now this side ribbon, right, of the ribs, these are, we'll call these ribbons for the next pose. So this ribbon chamber, we're going to be kind of turning it into a little boat. So roll into your right hip, come on up, and I think your blankets could be about the same. You'll just take a seat on, and then you'll put that right leg, so I'm going to try to pivot myself here and see if you can observe a little easier. So, make sure I got this right. Now you're going to have your left leg bending, and you'll put your sand on the top. Well, I guess not the top of the leg because you have the leg moved out. But if you're in this shape, like I mentioned, we're working with the ribs, the breathing muscles, and then I take that right leg and cross it over. Okay, so if this is a choice in your knee that you need to change it because of the left knee pressure, your accessible pose might be the left leg straight, okay? Or it might be the left leg bending. So what we'll work with is turning to the right. Can everybody see me fine when I'm in this direction? Okay, I could turn the other way though on the map, but we'll just keep going with it. So we turn to the right. I've got this blanket challenge here. I'm going to try to move them closer to my hand. So when I turn to the right, it's this rib layer, right? It was recently this way, which is okay for you to kind of do that movement, of course. But feel how the right foot, you want to keep the toes so that they're conforming to the knee's needs. So it would not be a nice option for my knee if I force my foot to be straight and then it hurts my knee. So I have to kind of go with the flow, like you adjust into the arch. So I put the left arm to the right leg, hook that arm, straighten the arm or bend it. If you're really long armed, you can bend it usually easily. Okay, now as I straighten the arm or bend, you're gonna turn. Feel how the circulation wrangles through the back ribs. And you wanna feel like this whole center chamber is getting a bit of it's a massage, but even when you're in a still shape and you're breathing. So it's really between you, yourself, and the pose at this point. So I tend to feel like, oh, I'm going to try to pull my core muscles deep and centered, and that gives me a better experience. Well, even a little bit less than trying to suck in. See if you can let the belly kind of sway with the breath. Good. So get a feel of that rotation with the assistance of your right hand. Either it's on the floor, or it's on a blanket or two. Yeah, don't worry if the arm is a little bit of funny looking on the back arm. You want to feel the movement of the shoulders turning. And then unwind, don't want to exhaust ourselves, and then stretch the right leg open. And then get a belt and stretch it out. Just get the belt unraveled. No big belt operation here. Just put it under that right foot and hold so that the direction now is my left knee is up. I'm gonna actually put a ball under it, a little nicer to my knee. And as I pull with that right hand, I'm going to kind of prop my elbow to the leg, and I might stretch my hand farther down the belt so I can get a little bit more pull in my rib space. And notice, do you feel like it's the skin on the side, or do you actually feel deeper to the ribs? So it's either superficial or just under that layer of dense fibers like fascia. So get a sense of pulling. And just enough, not too much, like back off if it feels like it's all into the back left side of the waist. See if you can make sure more of your body senses circulation. And left arm could be behind your back, could be over the left side of your head, but the sand is still on the left leg. That didn't change. And kind of find that sense of leanage. And maybe your head is turning actually towards the right leg. And breathing, so you're pulling with the hand. Yeah, and I imagine there's particles of concentration that are in that left hip as much as there's concentration in the back waist. So present focus on inhale And long exhale. Slide the hand and the spine like you've got a string on the top of your head taking you up. Okay, and then once you take the belt off, you'll slide both of your feet to cobbler's pose. And we'll put the sandbag on top of the feet. So the feet are together. They're kind of like an open book. And then taking that belt overhead, holding wide, as generous as you want to be with your hold. You can go far out, and you can also take the hands closer in. But sense where the shoulders are back and the circulation in the chest is open. It's probably higher in the chest than you were using in the last, half hour or so on this pose. And it sort of trickles into the shoulders like in a strength way. You think of a pull down, like a lat pull down kind of a maneuver. So what I want you to work on is to feel the shoulders back. And heck, if it feels too much with the belt, you don't have to use it, right? If you decide, oh, I'm gonna bring my arms out and be in the shape but not strain, it's okay. That's still working the system of the shoulders. Okay, and then you'll take that belt. So you want to hold the belt with your left hand. So I tend to hold the belt palm open and then reach the left elbow pointing up. My hand reaches back behind my head. And then I reach with the right hand to the belt up, and I want to hold the part of the belt my hand is holding. I know that's obvious, but sometimes you get lost when your hand is behind your back. And you're stretching that left tricep a bit. Okay, so if this is enough with the belt, you can keep using the belt. I use the belt even if my hands can hold. I get a stretch that way. I get that circulation in the back arm flesh. Okay, so keep it pretty pure here. So that means we're going to take the right hand out from behind. I'm going to sneak it up to the belt and then change sides. So my left hand comes around to get a hold. So you want to play a bit with this. So your purpose with that hand holding and taking it back is that strength into the back of the arm. So it's a blend of strength and stretch, right, with using a belt. The left shoulder probably feels it a bit, the rotator cuff. There's some spots in there that you're going to feel that circulation. It's the same time the legs are working and the hips are working. I know, no vacation in this moment. Okay, once you've identified with a tricep or two, okay, let that belt go. And then take your shoulders to rolling back just a few times. And then get the sand, lift it up to that right leg, slide the right knee down, cross the left leg over, and then start to take on that twist to the left side. So just kind of keep in momentum. Yeah, and if you use the blanket stack, if you have a little bit higher, then slide it over. But find the appropriate edge with the arms. So one side, there's a likely experience of differences here in your back range and your hip range, but it's probably SI joint stuff that occurs here with your flexibility, right? When you can go one side a little further than the other. So notice that you're trying to work on some balance with the ribs turning in the mid to upper, and stay steady with that direction. So it's not about too much twist here, but feeling the breath in the core. I know we kind of feel like we do a lot of that in this session, so you might start to dwindle your enthusiasm a bit, but stay with the pattern like it's your self-care is healthcare practice. Okay, now as you feel that you can unwind, I want us to keep patterning. So left leg goes out, right? Right knee is open and you could use a ball under your knee. And then take your belt, bend your left knee to scoop up the belt under your left foot. There it is, but yours is probably on the floor. And then push out with that foot into the belt. Hold and be very balanced on how you find symmetry with your hold of your belt. And then bend your left elbow and lean in. So we're promoting that side circulation in the right side. And feel the tilt. So when you feel tilting with the waist, manage the direction so the back muscles are feeling supported on both sides. Okay, so if you're tilting and you feel a lot of pressure impacting, compressing the left side of the spine, then you might work with a little higher lift with the ribs, and then a pivot through the ribs towards the right. And then maybe that's a little better balance for your back. And stretch the right arm over the right side of your head or behind your back. Simply breathe. Lean into it. Center. Now that you start to let go of the hold of the belt or slide up, we'll take the belt and the leg, actually the leg and the belt forward. Take the sand off the right leg and be simple here. We're just going to push into both of the feet with the legs in simple forward bend, seated forward. And with the hands holding on, I want you to pull yourself forward and find how you represent your center spine. And so you keep everything lengthening instead of the wedge of the back flexing. So I want you to pull so the ribs are trying to push a little forward. Maybe your hands walk down on the belt, so you might initiate that, but we're not in a position of trying to round right now. So just extension, spine extension. So tap into the awareness. You don't have to tap your back, but in your back and your legs, the back line. Breathe. Okay, now feel the belt closest to the balls of the feet. So you want to feel the belt so it's high on the foot, the bottom of the foot, kind of just below the toes, and really pull. Okay, so this doesn't mean that you have to create that extension anymore, but this will be a blend of moving into sandy feet in a moment. So I want you to feel the calves, and the knees are micro bend, right? So a little bit of a bend. Okay. Now, when you tilt forward at your waist, you can feel that magnifies the leg sensation. Okay. So now take the belt off. That means you're going to come onto your back here. And so let's bend our knees and shift. Some of these things you don't need to be mentioned for me, I know, but when you come into this back position, have a blanket single at the back. Have a block to the sides, a ball to the side, sand in your lap. That makes it easier to get into the pose. Enough space in front of you in case you're at a wall like me. I think you can see me pretty good here. I'll shift back so I don't hit the wall. Okay, so as I lower back, I want to have the blanket under head. And I initiate the focus in my lumbar. So the last pose we did was that seated shape. It's kind of different. When you get in this shape, it's similar in your body awareness. Get your sand on your feet, bend your knees, of course, deeply. And then once your feet push up, noticing the difference in your calves and the back muscles when you're on your back to work with these kind of programming circulation internally. I prefer this over seated forward bend for my circulation benefit. I know that they both promote some similar benefits. This is an inversion, so the benefit really outweighs. Ha ha. your sand on your feet, but feeling, adjust your clothing quite a bit, feeling that arched pattern. And then if you can let your arms find where do you feel comfortable. Maybe it's to have them, I sometimes like my arms on my bolster, but that's maybe works from a short frame, I'm not sure. And some of us will like to have cactus arms. So a little of everything could be good. Space between the knees, make sure that it's not all of a sudden sealed up. And it's a little easier to manage that when you're upside down versus sitting and leaning forward. So belly moves. You want to feel the abdomen and experience the belly drawing back towards the spine. Feel the lift of the legs, perfect for you. So for some of us, it's a little forward. Let's let today's be what works best for your conscious, pure balance. Where does it feel balanced for you? And it might not be with sand. You might decide to go without the sand and have just the feet up. Now, if the legs happen to be straight and the feet are flexing, they seem to work best in this shape when they're straight to get a nice flex in your feet. When I bend the knees and micro bend and flex, it's not quite the same circulational benefit from the meridians in the back, right? So you want to have that kind of full positional flush. Now, that said, right, this is not an acupuncture session, but you still are working on the meridian lines in the back. And so when you do flex into the feet, well, actually, I don't know what you're flexing necessarily exactly into. It's probably not into the feet, but you find the mechanics of the feet motioning to hold the sandbag. The more you think of it, the more you think about it, I guess. But find where the abdomen moves, so the diaphragm has to kind of push in this alternate way that it's experiencing in daily habit. It's going upside down. It's not too intense. It's not a headstand, but it still has to operate, backwards in this position. So strengthening the diaphragm, your breathing muscle, main breathing muscle. Okay, now, if the arms are kind of in this passivity position, I want you to take either the block would be best here. You could use a belt and hold that overhead too if you're pushing into your block, hurts your shoulder for any reason. But we want to sometimes find an energy like we did pulling with a belt before overhead. And now I want you to find the energy of pushing in. And I guess that's to emphasize. I want you to like magnify it so you're feeling like your whole thing is to tighten and tighten, but feel the energy of pushing in with the hands. And can you create that energy with the hands on the block wide? Block is wide, without struggling in the face, the jaw, the throat. Try to attain calm under pressure. Now, at some point, the feet probably have stopped following your instruction on staying as flexed as possible. They just find a neutral position like they do when they stand on the floor, right? You stand into them. They conform. Okay. But as you bend your knees, by now you might feel a little tiny bit of a tingle in the feet, or the blood flow has now moved to all of the organs. It's moved away from the feet. So that's what we're trying to focus on for the circulation. And then as I bend the knees, I'm going to move my sand away. Well, not completely away, but move my sand, oops, to the back of my legs. I'm going to do a full positional reset there. At least you're not on some high bar or something, so you made it through. Okay, so have the sand on the back of the leg, so it's upward facing, forward bend. All right, and as my knees are bending, this is a little bit easier to do than having sand on your shins for all of our knees, right? You still feel the crease and that stretch into the kidneys, no kidding, right? You might not have a recognition of the sense of them, but you do feel a squeezing of the knees in and a stretching of the back flap of the waist, back flap. Okay. Now, really enjoy how the back of the waist and the hips have more of an openness here, okay? So what I want us to pattern is when we get our path into bridge pose right now is, I guess I'm trying to work with finding patterns that are, you know, I've used these for a long time, and how can I find a way that feels good, not just doing the pose sequence, but I feel good circulation. So notice this is a full stretch of the back, and how we do yoga is we do counter poses, right? We go one direction, the other direction, doing adjustments in our body. So I'm going to give you the full option here. If you want to do the path of moving the sand away, which we'll all get sand away, but you're going to bring the knees to point up and then let the movement of the legs kind of saunter side to side. And you might have them kind of go over to the side and let the opposite hip lift, or you might do minimal movement so the opposite hip doesn't lift up. So you be the decider. But stretch the arms so they're back behind you with that block, okay? Try to hold on to it and manage the movement of the legs side to side. I'm assuming you're the only leg manager right now. Yeah, give it a few more each side. And then with that pattern of movement, feel how the arms adjust, especially if they try to be straight. They may be bending a little bit to hold the position in the hips. Okay. Now with the hands moving to the bolster, you're going to squeeze the knees into whatever is the best reach of your knees to your chest. Not that, I guess the best is probably makes it like you've got to go further, but feel the movement of the legs back and then the pressure of your hands on the bolster, and then push the bolster. And then be ever so careful as your spine lowers. And I like to really milk this one, especially with my knees to my chest. So at some point, your stomach muscles, they're not going to fall out, but there's a fallout in them when they don't really recruit right now. So feel when you lose the bolster, your knees moving in. And then I want you to try to keep a touch on the bolster, lift the feet straight up. I guess it's legs too, huh? They're part of it. And then move the legs forward. You don't have to touch the bolster. You probably will feel it. But I want your hands to still have some touch on the bolster. That's important. The buttocks probably too, but the hands are more important. Bring the legs back up to 90, and then lower on an exhale, the legs go down. And let's not give degrees because everyone's level of this is unique. So when I lower my legs, I want to keep my back flesh on complete contact so it's not trying to arch up. That's just my maximum, truly comfortable range. And then once you bring your feet to the bolster, and you push it a little forward, but not too much. So you want to be able to stand into it. Lift up the hips, take that block. I think you have one overhead, I bet. And place it so it's flat under the back of your pelvis, but not touching, right? So you're not trying to relax onto it. So it's a spacer, so you don't want to go below. You don't want to touch your block. So the arms are down, the palms are open, so they're straight down towards the bolster. And as you lower down, you want to be just above that block. Your clothes are probably going to feel the block. Then breathe so the belly moves, and exhale. And then inhale, lift up the hips. So you're maximizing it. Quads. Okay, now you're going to turn the block to the second height if that's possible. If it's not a good idea for you today and that feels too much, then you go stay with the low height. And you lower down on the block. And I can't quite get my, kind of like I'm pulling my pant a little bit out. You want to have that space to really relax into the block. So it's above my tailbone, right? It's not down on my tailbone space, not down on my buttocks. It's a little bit higher. But some people really prefer just right near the tailbone, the block. Okay, so find a space. It's often taught, I'll just demo with the other block, with a block under your spine so it's lengthwise. This is an Iyengar wave of movement, is the lengthwise. And I find that this horizontal works for my SI, so I find this just works better for me, but you can try other ways. And as the feet have their width on the bolster, take them out a little wider. You got a whole bolster, you have a nice range there. So we're kind of getting away from that idea we have to be narrow here. So feel the feet wide. Well, if you don't have wide feet, you just feel the feet in a wide stance. And let the arms be down by the sides, the shoulders kind of snug in towards the spine. You've now got this puppy chest, okay? And then where the spine is touching at the base, maybe touching the block, I want you to press into the feet, in 2 feet, in 2 feet's time, okay? And then relax your pressure so you're all on the block. Lift up the hips now, push into your feet, lift the hips up, slide the block out, stretch your arms overhead, inhale, hips maybe up another ½ inch, move the blanket if it's distracting your full massage through the spine. And then let the spine start to lower. And I want you to focus on the sense of the spine touching vertebrae by vertebrae. The arms will likely get going and move, but slower, right? Because you've got more to go with the arms and the spine. But once you traction down, let's say you've got no blanket in your head, I want you to let your head maybe do some small nods so you're lining up through the neck. And then again, use the blanket if it feels more comfortable though. And then edge all the way down and scoop behind the legs in towards knees to chest. We're going to do 5 more of those drawbridges. And if a blanket under your head feels better, just use it. So if I'm like on this hard floor and it's not my favorite feeling right now, then I just use my blanket. It's okay. So lower down the feet on bolster, inhale, lift up, and be casual about your carriage of moving. And we're going 5 more times. So you take the path of awareness through the back. Each of the bridges will probably feel slightly different. And when you land, you want to get a feel that you completely land through that back of the pelvis. So there's a natural arch in the spine. Right, so you have to get that full pelvic landing and then lift up. So at some point when I do the bridge patterns, I mean, I do them different all the time, but it's that right before you land, probably 5 seconds before, where you try to figure out how to move your pelvis down to get the most out of the pose. So if you're not really feeling controlled in the pelvis or feeling satisfied with that movement, use a block or a ball between the knees, okay? So the ball is more responsive, as you know, with pelvic floor work. So you might well, sometimes it is. You might like the ball or the block. And then that might give you a different level of centeredness through the pelvis. Yeah, I feel a little bit less confused about how to land my pelvis with the ball between the knees. Meaning it just feels kind of smooth and supported. You might add the blanket the last couple times. I think some of us are probably on 5 by now. Okay, so come through the last pattern and then have something between the knees, whether it's ball or block, and have that purpose of a spacer there. Just get a feel of that with your pelvis down completely. Okay, and then last time when you're here with that leg positioning, squeezing in to the ball or block, if you've got a ball, it's a little more beneficial for the circulation in the thighs, the tone. You're going to really squeeze into the ball, squeeze. And then release the grip. Move the ball. If you have a ball, do a little bit of self-massage. Put the ball so it's underneath one of your rears. So it's got to go one glute at a time and massage into that glute. If you don't have a ball and you're waiting for the next instruction, you'll do windshield wiper, right? So with the feet on the bolster, knees zigzag side to side. That's fine. Either way, ball or no ball. You got something to do to massage the back of the pelvis. So they're both helpful. Sometimes this feels pretty good. So if you're on one glute, go to the other. Take the time, if you're windshield wipering, to sense direction with your hips shifting and supporting through the belly. And we all have as much time as we want massaging. So if you want to keep with that, stay with the program, but I'll keep going with the instructions. So those that don't have one can have something. So you'll take the bolster, you'll push it over with your feet into the right side of your mat, off the mat to the side. And then we stretch out through the left leg. So I want you to lower down the right thigh. It's kind of turned out, most likely. Stretch the left knee over to that bolster. Okay, I've got a blanket under my head again. I take a ball and place it to the sacrum or wherever it kind of smushes in to hold that back layer. And then you'll add, where did my sandbag go? There it is. Add the sand to the exterior left thigh. If you want to use sand, no requirements. If you do add sand to the arm, right, you want to be sure that it's really on the attachments, right, versus like just the arm piece. You could have it just on the chest, but you just don't want to be pulling the arm off there. Have connections. So as your leg is crossing, let the arm open, turn the head to the left. Come into the shape. And require a little curiosity. Maybe you push the bolster downwards until you can feel like a stillness. The muscles are likely kind of firing after you arrive in the shape. Like they respond. And with that response, breathe. So we've moved some of the layers of the ribs down into the hip and then into the legs themselves. So let the duration give a few more moments here of focal connection with that left outer leg up into the hip joint. And then the nice blend of movement into your back with the leg crossed right now. So even though it seems like you're still, there's a great deal of movement required internally. You're having to create movement to get here, but then kind of that connection with the breathing and then inner stillness, right, with the breath. So there's some layers of high activity and sensitivity for your personal experience, right, with this inner environment. Now, the leg might still have more to go with the sensations here, so you can always stay with it. But, sometimes, a minute and a half to 2 minutes is good to get a timing on it and have it even on both sides. And then you can go from there in your home practice. If you find some of these are helpful or they feel good with no understanding why, but you like it, then you could add the timing in it. So we're going to move the ball first, if that's what you have, and then we'll move the sand. Guess you can move either first. I haven't heard a rule on that. And then when you bring your knees back in, you might feel, oh, okay, maybe your legs are going to be low versus scooped into your chest. Maybe you feel really good to bring your knees in and circle. So they're not completely tucked into your chest, but they're held. You're kind of holding the patellas and just circling along the outer rim of the sacrum. This feels great after that crossover. Let's keep it simple. Personalize that pressure with turning the knees where it feels like it could use the support and movement. And then reach to your bolster. If you have a little handle on the side, that can be helpful. And move it to the left side, or you might need to use your feet to kind of kick the bolster. Okay, so left leg down, right leg over. And again, we're finding ways to improve our relationship with our self-care. So, one day you might feel, oh, I'm stiff in this area and this is hard to get moving deeper. And then maybe you compensate with your lower leg and twisting and just kind of feel what can you stay with keeping your shoulders both back. That might be the most important piece, is to keep the shoulders both down. And that's a foundation for this shape for reclining leg crossovers, hip crossover. And once my shoulders are back, most of us probably, that's a simple thing, but it's getting them balanced, which is not so simple. Right? Getting a feeling of that right shoulder, because that's the opposite that what's the hip you're stretching. So the right shoulder and right hip have felt experiences here, even if it's not maybe as much in your chest. This is your chest. It is a shoulder piece though. Okay, stretch open the arms. Let your head roll to the right, taking that ball to the sacrum and getting a feel for your breath pace. Relaxing the heart. Now, if your head is turned to the right and you notice the neck is slightly pulling, you can bring your head back to center, turn your head to the left, and then maybe back over towards the right. So get a sense of movement through the neck. And the movement's all supported and controlled. So it's not in midair. You know, you're not driving in a car and trying to swing your head around. You're supported with movement, right? In a car, you can't support movement with the hip and the knee and the foot. It's a fixed movement pattern. So this is kind of luxurious for the inner body, right? It feels like, oh, I can get some good ranges in my chest muscles, my breathing muscles, my belly muscles. Now, final few moments here. Great. So where you feel any support from the ball or the sand, you know, go with what seems the right movement, right? Maybe it's the ball first, maybe it's the sand. And then that movement to come up to sitting, you know, could be you roll to the side and push yourself up. It might be you roll onto your back now and you feel your hands at the knees and you circle. But noticing what is the right way to get up is really a little internal, right? So we want to find that we continue being well in our body, not triggering attention to tension. So when I roll up on my spine, I can get movement where I don't fling. I feel like it's all one piece going together. But you could roll to the side and push yourself up too. So some of you might go more this flinging position, but as long as you come up completely and you feel centered on your seat, we aim there. We aim to please. Okay, so get a scrunchie. Okay, get a bolster in front of you and try to land here on your seat on a blanket. I'm going to do a seated forward bend. Now you can either have your knees bending, feet as wide as your mat, bolster tipped up, forward, simple. Okay. You can also have your legs basically straight. You know, they're not straight in front of you, but they're lengthened out and they're in a more of a V position. But you want to find that you kind of keep the layer of the back of the knees reaching through the heels. So flexing and then leaning and try to get that bolster kind of far away from you. So it's a little more core challenge. If I have it closer, I'm moving more through my arch of my spine. And this way I've got a little bit of a core challenge trying to get to that forward bend. So the back muscles are going to be gripping to do this because your hands are touching and pushing. So I like this elevation versus if I was on the floor with my hands leaning, right? Then I definitely have a lot of flexion in my rib cage. So I want you to feel a little bit more extension there. And then as you're leaning, can you let your head lower down? Now this could also be with the feet down, bottom of the feet down, knees up. So this is also a nice way to go. But this is harder to get extension, right? This is more flexion and back. This is much more extension. But if it hurts to have your legs this way, then you don't do it. So explore for a few moments that movement base from your tail to your brainstem, and then the brainstem tilting down. Connecting the wires here, feeling and breathing. Now you're thinking, wires, do we have a new prop that we've added? I'll go into the garage and find a box of wires. If you're at home, we probably could figure out some new props. Okay, now if the legs have a kind of this vibration of pull, that's what we want, like positional reach through the back muscles of the legs. Okay, now come back to your center seated spine. Take a block set. You're going to take the 2 blocks at their second setting on the inside of the mat. Now lower down, actually, let's see how we can manage this one. Lower down your bolster across so it's horizontal. Bring your hands to that bolster and then slide the feet in so they're right on the inside. Well, they're right close to the blocks. Probably your toes might touch the bolster. So you're here and there's still that extension. So I want you to get a feel of the leg awareness. Now, when you slide your hands to your blanket, you're going to bring a leg up at a time onto the bolster and then be here for a moment. Get a feeling of the leg having a little bit of lift, like a uni leg, okay? And monitoring the core motion up. So I feel like I want like this kind of lift in my middle to kind of hold the balance. But it doesn't need to feel like you're kind of, you have like something holding you up. But I want you to get a feel of the hands on the ground or behind your blanket if your arms are long. And then scoot yourself off the blanket and then the legs up and scoot enough to the bolster that your legs are supported and they're separated. And if you do feel comfortable putting a sandbag across them, do so. If that's a little awkward for you to go down your back and then have that sand stuck on you, then don't do it. You can pass on the sand for certain. But your feet might get a little cuddly. That's okay. But we want to have a little space as much as we can and still have sand of the legs. And then as you guide back, elbows supported, hands holding onto that blanket to get it wedged the right way, a little circular a blanket under your neck is not bad, right? So we might find that's really good for our neck tone. So that could be an option. And then as your arms release down into Shavasana, right? As the legs have to maybe maneuver, your hips kind of wag a little side to side. And maybe the blanket feels good because you think it's better for you. And then you decide, oh, I'm going to switch it out. Play it out until you find that you have support for your neck. And then the arms are guided to simply be kind of not attentive to doing. To relax the fingers, let the feet float, and guiding the breath in through the nose and relaxing out through the mouth. If you have any hardware on your eyes, glasses, you might take that off. If you have an eye pillow, or if you need anything to cover you to keep yourself warm, I'll bring it up after the fact we get here, but it's nice to start getting some of those props out sometimes as we get an even better home practice. So returning to how we kind of started with focus, internalizing, eyes closed. And just noticing the enjoyment of experiencing a practice and absorbing the practice. Absorbing doesn't have to be with strong breathing mechanics. It could be just being. Now with the eyes relaxing, you might let your head nod, and with the support of not being, just on the ground, not trying to lift your head up, but really feeling the weight of your head back. Now, if the shoulders are opening the arms, you want to bring things a little close to your sides. Even with the sand perhaps on your legs, you can still circle your feet. Feeling the feet may be spiraling and making small-ish circles and maybe spanning out the roots of the toes. Good, go both directions. So you get a feeling of movement. And then with the feet relaxed and passive, start to guide a support for the legs to move towards you. So get a feeling here of sliding, and there's quite a bit for the core of the legs and the collection with that sand. So when you guide your knees in, I would be certain to move the sand away and then let the knees point out and the feet go together on the bolster. So you've got a good cobbler's pose. Okay, so feel where the knees are open, where the feet are together-ish, sort of together. And rest your balance at the back of the heart. So it's kind of high up in the core body. Now feel how your knees can slide out and then the feet slide out and the knees come back into center. Hook on the back of the legs. And then simply as you're holding, give yourself enough time to find comfort in your back here. And then rock a little side to side prior to coming around for a seat on a blanket or a towel. So I have enough support that the lift and the blanket might be, even a little bit rolled up. That's okay. So you find the anchor of sitting bones and knees as they kind of swing open, give this nice kind of basket at the base. And then with the spine up and the heart centered, let your hands be wherever you're comfortable for these breaths together as a collective. They might be resting in your lap, open. They might be connected together in front of the heart. Or they might come up together at the last moment connection. So with the sign of breathing in and breathing out, feel that felt connection. Inhaling full and exhale, bowing into the space behind your heart. In gratitude, namaste. Okay. Thank you. All righty.